Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nasdaq Dorsey Wright podcast for the week of October 18th, 2021. I'm Jay Greg Nanny here. Joining me this week is Sara. And hard to believe we're talking about October 18th. If you live in and around the Richmond, Virginia area, I hope everybody had a nice transition from summer to fall in one day and Saturday this week as temperatures fell pretty dramatically. But fall is in full effect. And when we go out there this time of year, as it relates to the market coming on off of the heels of the third quarter, this is the time of year where we get to see a lot of companies reporting earnings. And last week really started that third quarter earnings report in earnest with a lot of the banks, a lot of the financial names reporting. And, you know, a lot doing so were met with very positive, generally speaking, very positive reactions to the earnings news that was coming out and of a lot of the big names. And that has led to some strength within the financial sector. Financials in general have been pretty strong this year as it relates to their performance in the top 2 and 3 from a performance perspective for the better part of the year. But last week, the news as it was coming out of some of the financial names actually led to some new highs, especially in XLF, which is just the financials select sector SPDR ETF. So we continue to see positive developments there out of financials. This week, we'll see what the earnings season has in store for us this week with a lot of technology names, a lot of big high-profile names that are reporting this week as well as next week. So we'll certainly be sure to keep an eye on that. One of the other things, though, Sara, that we were talking about that we've been keeping an eye on, and a lot of people, I think, around have been keeping an eye on, specifically as it relates to, I guess, in line with financials and potentially, you know, a currency, I thought, is the idea of cryptocurrencies, and specifically Bitcoin being at the forefront of that, potentially becoming available to investors via an ETF. Now, there's been products out there in the marketplace that have provided some exposure to some individual coins that are out there. And there's even some indexes that are designed to track some of the broader basket of cryptocurrencies. But to this point, at least in the US, there has not been an ETF that has been available for Bitcoin or any cryptos. There's some overseas, there's some in Canadian markets. But that's one of the things that the SEC chair has recently come out and said that they're going to take a hard look at. And there's some, at least news looking like there could be that ETF reality coming very, very soon. So what we wanted to do, Sara, is spend a little bit of time today looking at the crypto space from a technical perspective. There's lots of different information out there in terms of why cryptos, what cryptos are. We track a number of the cryptos within our database. And so if we're looking at, just the crypto market today, what are some of the things that we're seeing as it relates to those charts?
Yeah, Jay, so we've seen a lot of chat out about these days of Bitcoin, and we've seen that positive news, if you will, reflected on the chart of Bitcoin, which can be found on our site with the $ symbol BTC. This chart has given 2 consecutive buy signals with action over the last week. We've actually seen it push through overhead resistance that dated back to May. And so now this chart has one level of resistance to go before marking a potential new all-time high, which would occur at 66,520 on this point and figure chart. We saw, this chart hit an all-time high back in April, and then we saw it give 5 consecutive sell signals where it found support at 30,473, which is a level that was first tested and held in January. And then again, we saw that level tested in June and July. So significant support there at that level. And then, if you were looking to track additional coins, we do have additional point and figure charts available under chart lists. And then under crypto assets. So a bunch to choose from if you're interested in the space. But there's also one other way to chart or to follow along the overall pricing and performance of a basket of crypto assets. And that's the Nasdaq Crypto Index, symbol NCI. It's made up of 10 coins. 60% is going to be really allocated towards Bitcoin, 30% Ethereum, and it also includes Bitcoin Cash, Filecoin, Chainlink, Litecoin, Uniswap, and Stellar. So again, that's the Nasdaq Crypto Index. Those coins have met liquidity screens. There's all sorts of the evaluations that's going on to make sure that they are liquid enough to be held in this index. And so again, Bitcoin, with that being the most popular, if you will, and probably most heavily traded, that's going to make up a little over 61% of that index. And so we've seen that index rally over 10% over the last week. We've been tracking it now since April 26th, and it is, again, available under symbol NCI if you were looking to track just the performance of a basket of crypto assets. But moving on into other, back into U.S. equity markets, if you will, one chart that I was mentioning to Jay earlier that caught my eye was the 50-point chart of the S&P 500. So we've seen that default chart give consecutive buy signals here. It remains off of its highs, but we have seen that 50-point chart, which is a very long-term view of, scaling back out, taking that super long-term view of the S&P 500's price movement. We've seen that reverse back up into a column of X's after a brief pullback this month. This chart had been trading straight up into a column of X's since April. And so, after 6 months, it did experience that pullback and now has reversed back up into X's, and now is one box from matching its all-time high at 4,500, and then 2 boxes from another consecutive buy signal, as well as a new all-time high. So that's one chart that I think it's a beautiful chart. If I can, from my analyst perspective, that is a chart that I've been following for a while, and I really just, even with the movement, during the COVID sell-off, where it gave those consecutive sell signals, that was a very uncomfortable period. But I think that this chart is very indicative of just, the brief pullbacks that we've seen in an overall healthy picture of this particular trend chart. But Jay, I know that you were discussing, some other charts that have maybe consolidated or getting getting closer to potentially breaking out.
Yeah, and you mentioned that 50-point S&P chart, Sarah, and you look at that, and really what it does is allows you to take a step back and gain some perspective on the market. You go back and you look at the sell signals that generated, back in March of last year, and subsequent buy signals since then. But it's a chart that has just, consistently for the better part of the past year and a half now produced a series of higher tops and higher bottoms. And especially when you get into a month like last month, the month of September, you get into periods earlier back in March of this year where some volatility begins to creep back into the market, and volatility that we haven't seen in a while. It's been going on a year and a half now that we've seen a 10% pullback in the market on average. That happens about once a year. So certainly a pullback would be within the very normal confines of market movements today. But you look at a chart like that, whether you're looking at the S&P, whether you're looking at individual stock, or even going back to our discussion earlier, whether you're looking at something like Bitcoin, utilizing the charts, looking at the point and figure charts can help reduce some of the noise that's out there in the marketplace. Not that it would, Bitcoin certainly is as volatile as there is out there, but you look at a point and figure chart of that, you look at it on the scale that we have it on there, which is on a 5% scale, and it helps just slow down that chart a little bit. It helps provide a little bit of longer term perspective for those of you who are looking at investing, like I said, in the crypto space or in any individual stocks. And so, last month you saw the market pull back in the month of September, which is, historically the worst month on record for the market. October is a month too that historically has brought with it some volatility. But now you look at the S&P, it's, within 2%, within about 1.5% of those all-time highs. So we'll see if we're able to get there in this month or as we move through into November. But you look at a number of other indexes outside of just the S&P 500, and one of those areas is small caps. And small caps are an area that have generally done okay. They haven't performed as well, at least the Russell 2000, as well as the S&P 500 has this year. But really what you've seen is you look at a chart of like the iShares Russell 2000 ETF IWM, and that chart, since February has just traded in this very tight range between 210 on the downside and 230 on the upside. The chart reversed back up in August and is close to hitting that 230 level again, which would be the 5th time this year that we've hit that level. So if you're able to clear that, that's one that I just set an alert on my chart here as we were talking through this, but set an alert at 235. That would be a breakout to the upside, would be a new high for IWM, would be a positive sign for small caps and IWM specifically. On the downside, 205 if you fell down, reverse back down, hit 205, that's going to be a breakdown and violate that support that's built up there at the 210 area, a support level that has held 3 different times this year, most recently back in the July-August time period. So, very interesting. Certainly, as we continue to move forward in the market, the overall trends of the small cap index specifically, as well as the vast majority of stocks, remain positive. But what you're seeing, especially as the market's pulled back a little bit, as we've seen some of this consolidation, you're looking at those levels and making sure you're aware of where those key levels of resistance are, as well as key levels of support are on those individual charts. And that can be seen, Sarah. We were talking about some individual names. There's a lot of large cap growth names that are reporting earnings this week. There's a lot that had similar activities early in the year where, you think back to some of these, big cap growth names, and, the first 3 months, 4 months of the year, they just kind of traded sideways in this range. And then ultimately we're able to break out to the upside and move to new highs. And maybe that's what you're seeing to some extent with small caps as we move through the market from here. So that'll be important to watch, interesting to watch. One other thing that we did want to bring up as it relates to upcoming events. There's a couple of those. One specifically later this week, we're doing a webinar in conjunction with ProShares as well as ETF Trends. That's going to be on October 21st, where we'll have Tom Dorsey, Chuck Fuller from our side will be talking about relative strength, specifically as it applies to relative strength on the Nasdaq 100, and looking at some individual stock there in terms of how we apply that relative strength ranking within the Nasdaq 100 universe. So look forward to that. If you are interested in that webinar, I would encourage you to sign up there. If you're watching this through YouTube, there's a link there in the description. If you're on our research platform, within the report in the Where You Were section, there's a link to sign up for that webinar there. But Sara, with that, I think that's about what we had to cover today, and wanted to look at the cryptos. If you have any questions as it relates to Bitcoin or the 50-point chart of the S&P or anything else for that matter, we're here to help you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. As always, we thank you for joining us on these podcasts this week and look forward to talking to you next week.